to the Patrick Party pregame show. It's a big one tonight. You have the Deep South's oldest rivalry. So much going on in the college football world today. So, look, we're here. Patrick Party pregame show. I believe our fourth Saturday we've been doing this. We have a new friend joining us today. Mr. Microphone is here, Big Mike. And hopefully our audio will be a little bit better than last week. I know it was a little bit fuzzy for some of you, but it's game day. It's finally Saturday, and the biggest game of the entire year is tonight, the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Auburn, Georgia, college game days there. Just so many headlines. It'll be on ESPN Saturday night tonight for a big, huge rivalry. One of the best rivalries in the entire game, one of the longest running rivalries in the entire game. It is overall going to definitely be such a great college football Saturday. Few headlines we want to talk about just before we, get into our actual, scheduled programming. I saw on Twitter last night the Pac-12 will be revealing its entire schedule on the big noon Fox kickoff. That'll be the second time a conference has done that. Remember, the Big Ten did that a couple weekends ago. So we have a lot to talk about all today. Of course, our main emphasis will be on the game in Athens, as in a big top 10 matchup, as the number 7 Auburn Tigers, who beat Kentucky last week, travel to Athens to take on the number 4 team in the land, the Georgia Bulldogs, and a big old showdown between cross-state rivals. So it should be a great game for sure. But let's start the show how we always like to, with our Saturday slate. So let's go ahead and get this thing rolling. You have the Florida Gators, number 3 in the country. I don't know. That's our first I don't know of the day. They looked good. They looked great. Their offense, they threw, I think they racked up almost 600 yards. I mean, a couple of teams almost got 600 yards. They scored about 40-something points. They looked great, but let's hold on for a second. I know Kyle Trask has a lot of hype. I know everybody is really into the Gators. They're the trendy if it's not going to be Georgia, it's going to be Florida. And then especially how Georgia came out last week against Arkansas. How could you not pick Florida? Oh, they look great. Well, let's think about this for a second, everybody. Ole Miss's defense stinks. And it's not just this year. They have stunk for a while. I mean, Ole Miss's defense hasn't been good in years. So I would hope most good teams would be able to do that. B, Florida's defense gave up a whole bunch of yards to Ole Miss. And they're not so Ole Miss's offense, they're good and all, and Lane Kiffin's a good offensive mind, but Florida needs to figure out the defense. So are they the third best team in the entire country? I don't know about all that. I don't know if they're the third best team. They're a good team. They're a top 10 team, but I don't know if they're the third best team. But they take on South Carolina. South Carolina lost to Tennessee last weekend, and a close one in Columbia. They'll travel. This will open up the swamp for the year, and only the Gators get out of live, and we'll have our pick later in the show. Oh, we forgot to mention our location reveal. The Patrick Party will broadcast, our 1-minute show from Garrett Harrison Stadium in Phoenix City, Alabama. It was the site of the Central Phoenix City and Auburn High School game last night. So many parallels with the city of, Columbus just across the river. So many parallels, with the Knickses. Patrick Nix is Central Phoenix City's head coach. His son, Caleb Nix, is Central's quarterback. And his other son, you probably heard of him, his name's Bo Nix. So a whole bunch of crazy things, that all kind of meant into that game. And, of course, we were there broadcasting that game. But let's keep it on our Saturday slate. Then you have Texas TCU on the big noon Fox game of the week from Darrell K. Texas Memorial Stadium. So Texas, they barely beat. I mean, it took a couple miracles for them to beat Texas Tech last week. Definitely a surprise. Texas Tech really blew it. They should have beaten Texas. Texas falls back from 8 to 9. Whatever. They were tied for 8, and so then they ended up just not being tied anymore. They were previously 9, tied for 8, back to 9. TCU, I don't know how much of a fight they'll give them. You always have to like Gary Patterson's defense, but we'll just have to see how Texas can do. I mean, Texas gave up a whole bunch of points to Texas Tech. I mean, it was in the 50s, and Texas Tech almost lost to Houston Baptist, which, I mean, you can't really play that game too much of they lost to them, and so then they lost to them, so are they really better? You can't really go too far down that line, but we'll just have to see how this all goes down. I'm not going to make my pick yet. You got to wait for that one. And then you have Tennessee, Missouri. Tennessee, so they actually, and we'll talk about this when we go through the entire AP poll in a couple minutes, but they actually ended up adding all of the Big Ten teams and I think only one Pac-12 team, but the Pac-12 teams back into the polls. They waited one more week, but they still don't play for a couple more. So I don't know how I don't know how you would rank. I know Ohio State's a really good team, I know that, but how do you rank them over teams that have played and they haven't even touched the field yet, and yet they're still number 6. So anyways, Tennessee, and the combination of they played fine at South Carolina. They didn't get the win though. So we'll just have to kind of see with all of that. They ended up falling back to 21. And then Missouri, we don't really know. Missouri's still a question mark. They got killed by Alabama, but I think a decent Missouri team would have gotten killed by Alabama. And Tennessee, they looked okay, but they didn't look like some just dominant team, which they weren't last year. And that's kind of what I've been saying is that, everyone was really big on their hype train. They weren't close to any of the decent team. Your Florida, Georgia, Alabamas, they weren't within 20 points in any of those. And then they barely beat a whole bunch of these other teams. And then, your middle SEC East teams. And then they came back and won their bowl game against Indiana. We're not talking like they beat anybody special. Indiana's special, but they're not special. So... yeah, so it's really, we'll just have to see. But Missouri, you don't know what you're getting with Missouri. They played okay with Alabama in that second half. Alabama obviously put their backups in, took the foot off the gas. So we'll just have to see how this one goes. But it'll be the home opener in Neyland Stadium. Then the SEC on CBS Game of the Week. And I do not know how CBS, or why, I guess is the word. Why did CBS pick Alabama, Texas A&M over Auburn, Georgia? They're both big-time ranked matchups, but I don't know. If you're talking about the better game, I know I obviously have a big opinion on it, but A&M did not look good last week. Let's just start there. A&M dropped kind of back to 13, which, no. It didn't, the polls don't really matter till the end anyways. We're just, SEC-wise, we're 2 weeks into this thing. But A&M, they didn't look enthusiastic. You could just tell they weren't in it with Vanderbilt, maybe, and probably they were, looking ahead to this Alabama game. But they just, Kellen Mond, who's the most experienced, by far, the most experienced quarterback in the SEC. He started as a freshman. He's now a senior. There's really no reason he shouldn't be great, and he's not. They've given him a whole bunch of hype, and it just hasn't worked out for them. So... who knows? We'll see. But I think Mac Jones and Waddle, they just all have looked great. So I don't think I would expect this one to be very close at all. And the home opener in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Then we'll take it out to the American. Let's see. So we have SMU and Memphis. And Memphis is ranked number 25 in the country. SMU and Memphis, that was a big, College Game Day was their last year big game. SMU's kind of falling back. Rhett Lashley left. So we'll see how their offense can still be okay. Memphis, though, is probably one of the favorites to get out of the group of 5 conferences and get into that big bowl game. So that's a fun one. There's not, other than Alabama A&M, ESPN and Fox, Fox, big noon football, whatever. ESPN, they really make the 11 a.m., your noon time slot really big, and then I've noticed they really make the night time slot really big. But during the middle of the day is actually when there's a whole not a ton of great games. Probably because the SEC on CBS. So, this is just one you can watch if that Alabama game gets ugly. Then you have, here's a good one, on the 3 o'clock-ish, whatever you want to call it, that middle of the daytime slot. Kentucky and Ole Miss both lost last week. It'll be the home opener for the Wildcats at Kroger Field for Mark Stoops and the squad. It'll be on the SEC Network. And, Kentucky, they lost to Auburn. Ole Miss lost to Florida. Ole Miss scores, these are pretty much two very different teams if you think about it. Ole Miss, They throw it all over the field. They're running up and down. Their defense isn't that great. Kentucky's defense is great, and Kentucky just wants to pound it with the run. Two very different offenses. Just really schemes and all. So it's going to be interesting to see who can come out at this one in Lexington. Then we get into the nighttime time slot. We have the LSU Fighting Tigers from Tigerland traveling up to Nashville to take on the Vanderbilt Commodores on the SEC Network at 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central. LSU fell all the way from 6-20. They got beat by Mississippi State. Mississippi State went in, racked up over 600 yards of offense. I was very shocked how that went down. I've been saying I don't think LSU's going to be, obviously they're not going to be as good last year, but I thought they would really take a step back, kind of have a comeback to earth moment for them. But, they got beat. Mississippi State looked really good. It was the chemistry. The wide receivers for Mississippi State was something that really surprised me. Mississippi State takes on Arkansas, by the way, on SEC alternate in this time. But we'll see. Vanderbilt almost beat Texas A&M. Was it more that Vanderbilt looks better or that A&M looks worse than we thought? We'll see. I wouldn't expect anything too crazy in this one, though. Then you have Clemson in a rematch of the ACC championship game last year on the ACC network at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central from Memorial Stadium. So let's go ahead and see. Clemson, I don't think they're going to probably lose unless they lose to Notre Dame. This might be a good one for a quarter. So if you're going to watch this one, watch it earlier in the game because the later, most likely the worse. And then the game of the day, the game of the year up until this point, the 125th edition of the Deep South's oldest rivalry between the Auburn Tigers, number 7 in the land, against the number 4 Georgia Bulldogs between the hedges in Sanford Stadium tonight on ESPN Saturday Night Football at 7:30 Eastern Time, 6:30 Central Time. So normally ESPN Saturday Night Football is on ABC. It'll be on ESPN. Due to contracting, SEC can't be on ABC quite yet. That'll probably all change when the CBS deal runs out because CBS isn't renewing, but we're not going to get into the contracts right now because we got a big one to talk about. College game days there. Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler, they'll be calling the game tonight on ESPN. ESPN just had it gifted. CBS didn't pick this one, and ESPN is just so happy. This is a big game. So let's go ahead and kind of dive into this one a little bit. We're going to go ahead, we'll have a whole preview of the Auburn-Georgia game, by the way. That's not all we're talking about. That's like half the show. So let's go ahead and get into our Auburn-Georgia by the numbers. Kind of look at the rivalry as a whole. So over the 125, they played 124 times up until tonight. Georgia is leading the series 60-56 with 8 ties, and Georgia is currently on a 3-game winning streak. The largest margins of victory for Auburn, 44-0, for Georgia, 41-0. And win streak-wise, Auburn's longest was 6 in a row. Georgia's longest was 9 in a row. And then we'll just kind of go back and forth between some major stats between both schools. Both schools have the same amount of national championships at 2. Obviously, Georgia's. They're celebrating their 40th anniversary of their last national championship. That is correct. You heard it right. 40 years. It's been a minute. Auburn, on the other hand, it's only been 10 years, and Auburn's played in a couple more since then. So they're tied for that. Overall, all-time record in winning percentage. Georgia leads that with a .655. Auburn is at .631. Some conference championships. Georgia has 14. Auburn has 12. Bowl games. Georgia's played in 56. Auburn's played in 44. All-time wins. 832 to 777. Georgia leads that. Heisman winners, though. Auburn has the lead 3-2. And we're going to just go ahead and say it definitively here on this show. Bo Jackson is better than Herschel Walker. I just thought that needed to be said. I think Auburn's number 34 is better than Georgia's. And I just think that was entirely necessary. But when you look at it, so my broadcast for the Patrick Party this week was in Phoenix City, right next door to Columbus, and the Tigers and the Dogs played in Columbus from 1916 until 1958, just the year after Auburn won that national championship. The rivalry has also been played in Atlanta, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, Montgomery, Alabama, Macon, Georgia, and it started off in Atlanta. Of course, that was Auburn's. Georgia had played Mercer as their first ever college football game. Auburn played Georgia, won 10-0 in 1892 on February 20th. And then pretty much from there on out, other than just a couple of times, they have played in early November, late October, but we are in the beginning of October, the beginning of the season. So it is just truly crazy how this has all gone down. Well, so that's our Auburn, Georgia by the numbers. Let's go ahead and get into our top 25 breakdown. A lot of movement in the polls, as we have been telling you. So, like we said, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 ended up getting brought back in the polls, even though we have to wait quite a while. And remember, the Pac-12, right after the Patrick Party pregame show ends, as we get about a third of the way through the show right now this morning, on this great Saturday morning. You'll be able to go, if you want to Fox. Fox has their big noon kickoff pregame show, with Urban Meyer, all those people. And they're going to be revealing the Pac-12 schedule. So we'll get to see Oregon and Arizona State. That's probably the matchup everyone would want to see. Those are probably the two favorites out of the North and the South to get to that championship game in Santa Clara, California at Levi Stadium. So, yes, you'll want to tune into that. But let's go ahead and get into, there was a lot of movement in the polls. Of course, with the first SEC weekend, when, someone has a big upset, they really like to rank them high. Everyone really reacts big that first weekend. Well, everyone likes to react big all the time. But let's just go ahead and get into it. So, you're probably top 5. Well, there's even movement up as close to here. We had the upset of Oklahoma, which we haven't even talked about yet, how terrible Oklahoma looked. But, they had the heart of a champion, so I'm sure they'll make it back to the playoffs. Anyways, so you have Clemson in the 1, Alabama in the 2, Florida slides on up to the 3. We'll see how the Gators can do in the Swamp today. Georgia's in the 4. Notre Dame slid up to the 5. Ohio State came in at 6. They kind of ranked them a little bit lower, a little bit back in the polls, until they kind of start playing, and I'm sure they'll give them all the love they need. And then Auburn's in the 7. Miami. Let's talk about Miami for a second. Talk about overreaction. Miami's played on Saturday Night Football on ABC the last 2 weekends, beating Louisville and Florida State. That's great for Miami. I'm happy for them. I'm happy for Rhett Lashley. I'm happy for everybody involved. But let's be real for a second, everybody. Florida State and Louisville. Are they really that good? Are they really that good? I'm going to go ahead and say no. I think Auburn would have done the same thing, if not worse, to Florida State and Louisville. No offense to those teams. I just don't think Miami's the 8th best team in the entire country. We'll find out, though. They like to rank them high when they're playing great. You have Texas in the 9, the next Big Ten team. Penn State is in the 10. UCF is the highest-ranked group of 5 team. They beat Georgia Tech a couple weeks ago. They're in the 11. North Carolina's in the 12. Texas A&M slid to the 13. Oregon, our first and I believe only Pac-12 team, is in the 14 spot. Cincinnati's in the 15. Mississippi State, after just beating the Met. Well, they didn't really beat them bad, but they ran up 600 yards of offense in Tiger Stadium. There were multiple times they fumbled in the fourth quarter. I was like, uh-oh, here comes LSU coming back. No. Mississippi State, they kept their foot on the gas. They kept going. Mike Leach kept throwing, and they kept winning, and they ended up winning in Tiger Stadium. Probably the biggest shock of week 1 of the SEC. And then you have Oklahoma State and Oklahoma in the 17-18. Oklahoma falls all the way down to 18. I'm shocked. When they lost, I was like, oh, you watch. They'll drop from 3 to 5. Poor Oklahoma. No, they actually punished them. But we'll see. I'm sure when they get a win against someone not that great, Texas, because I don't think Texas is as great as everybody says, they'll probably get all the way back up. We'll see. Wisconsin's in the 19, another Big Ten team. LSU falls all the way from 6 to 20. And then you have Tennessee at 21, kind of falling down. BYU, 22. Michigan's in the poll at 23. Pittsburgh at 24, I believe. Pittsburgh is still undefeated. And then Memphis is in the 25 spot to round out our Week 5 AP poll. And then we're going to take a little bit deeper of a dive as we kind of continue this segment into our top 10 teams, starting from Clemson all the way down to Penn State. So we'll start with Clemson. I don't see too many roadblocks except for that Notre Dame game. You see it right there. Yeah, Notre Dame. It should be a big one. It'll be interesting to see how that goes down. But other than that, other than Clemson, Notre Dame, I wouldn't be too surprised if Clemson was undefeated. But, they might have to end up playing Notre Dame or maybe North Carolina twice because of their ACC championship game. So maybe Clemson can stumble. We'll see. It's hard to beat a team 2 times in a row, but normally the best can still do it. Alabama's in the 2. Alabama looked great against Missouri, but if they hadn't, I would have really been concerned for them. So we'll see. They open it up on the SEC CBS game of the week against Texas A&M at home in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Florida's in the 3. They play today against South Carolina at home, their home opener. And then Georgia has their home opener too. Of course, in the Deep South's oldest rivalry, a big one for sure. Notre Dame is in the 5 halfway through. Notre Dame, they've looked okay. I think this ACC schedule could actually help them. Maybe they could even lose a game and get into the playoffs. I just think with all these conference schedules, it's going to be hard, especially for the SEC, just to have someone go undefeated. I mean, that would just be incredible. Ohio State, they're back in. They don't start play for about 2 or 3 more weeks. So we'll see how the Buckeyes kind of linger around until they really get into this thing. And I really think here's what I think about Ohio State. And I was thinking about it. I don't think very many people wrote down Ohio State number 6. I think there were a lot of people that said Ohio State number 3, number 2. And then so they wrote them down for that. And then a whole bunch of people probably didn't put them in the polls at all. So it was such extremes that they ended up falling to 6. So, oh well for them. I think that's kind of the case with a lot of the Big Ten schools. Because they just, some people are like, well, I'm not going to rank them. They haven't played yet. And I understand that. I probably tend to agree with that thought. And then you have Ohio State. Auburn is in the 7 spot. Auburn or Georgia will be ranked as high as they want if they win today in that top 10 matchup. Miami is at the 8. We've already kind of rambled about Miami for a second. I don't know about Miami. I do not know. I don't think Miami is that good, but we'll be nice to them because of Rhett Lashley, so go Hurricanes. Texas is in the 9. Texas should have fallen back a little bit more. They didn't look good against Texas Tech. It took a miracle for them to come back. But they came back. They had the willpower. They were down 2 touchdowns with 3 minutes to go. They had the willpower to come back, so good for them. Penn State is in the 10 to round us out. They look to have a big season. We'll see if they can potentially beat Ohio State. And now we'll get into the bulk of our show, the Deep South's oldest rivalry preview. Oh, we have a lot to talk about here as we break down the matchup of the day, the Patrick Party game of the day. FYI, we have our Auburn-Georgia preview is out. You've got our newsletter. You should have already gotten it. And, in the newsletter, there's not enough space, so you can continue the article. You just have to go to patrickparty.com. There's a link right there in the article. And then literally it goes to the homepage. You scroll down about an inch, and it's right there. So you just click on it. So Auburn's Deep South's oldest rivalry between Georgia and Auburn. Our previews on patrickparty.com if you want to read that article. Also in our newsletter for those of you that subscribe. So let's go ahead and get into our Auburn-Georgia preview. It is a big game. A lot on the line. Georgia's won 3 in a row. Auburn has not won in Athens since 2005. A couple stats right now. Auburn hasn't won in Athens since 2005. I'm currently 17. I was 2 at the time, just for some perspective. Let's see, what else? Oh, in College Game Day, when College Game Day was on site at an Auburn game, Auburn is 10-10. So we'll see. And then I believe when Auburn is number 7 and it's the top 10 matchup between Auburn and Georgia, Auburn is 4-1. So we'll see how this all goes down tonight. I think it's going to be a really good game. I really do. I don't see this being a blowout either way. I'd be very surprised. But let's just kind of go ahead and kind of recap that Auburn-Kentucky game real quick. So, you had Auburn. I thought the offense, I know everyone has a little bit different of opinions. It was clear. Chad Morris was running that offense. It was, it was a little bit different, a lot more throwing. Bo Nix mostly targeted Seth Williams. Seth Williams had 2 touchdown receptions. I think he's going to need to kind of spread the ball around. I know Cedric Jackson was not playing, but between Eli Stove, who caught a touchdown, Anthony Schwartz only got a couple of targets. I think he's going to need to spread it around more because he mostly targeted Seth Williams, and Georgia can just key on one person. That's not going to be the end of the world for them. So we'll see. That offensive line, it was kind of weird how that offensive line went down. They were really kind of shifting around. Alex Jackson didn't have that great of a game at left tackle. Austin Troxel will probably get the start today. Tayshawn Manning, Nick Brahms. They had a couple. I was surprised about this. The center, the only one returning, Nick Brahms, who's played last year in all these big games. They had some snap problems. I don't know if that's just chemistry. They didn't have a lot of practice. We'll see. And who really knows why or how all that went down. And then Brandon Council played great, but Ham the same. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Big Cat Bryant, this was kind of a surprise when that game started that nobody knew was happening. Big Cat Bryant did not play that entire first half and ended up only playing a little bit of the second half. He made a big difference when he was in the game, but I think that definitely hurt Auburn. And then on the defensive tackle position, Tyron Truesdale, kind of Auburn's main, the senior, but also a senior. They had said they were going to start Colby Wooden. Everyone was a little surprised, the redshirt freshman, but they played Daquan Newkirk a while, the senior, number 44, and he looked great. He was definitely, there were multiple times I was like, 44, Daquan. I kept looking, I kept seeing him on the depth chart, and I kept making plays, and so I was definitely, impressed with his play. He definitely caught my eye for sure. And then the linebackers, Owen Papo looked really good. KJ Brett always looks good, it seems like. Zacoby McClain as well. The linebackers, I felt like a little bit last week the linebackers were sometimes out of position a little bit. I think a lot of times, Kentucky ran the ball so much, we were really trying to key on that run. And, when they did throw it, sometimes there weren't people in the vicinity, but that's okay. And then, I just thought, for the most part, I thought the defense, one of the trademarks of Kevin Steele, and what makes Kevin Steele, in my opinion, the best defensive coordinator in the entire country, is how he can adjust. The defense didn't look, I'm going to be honest, we were all sitting here, I was like, well, I don't really know what to expect from the offense, but this defense, they're going to show up. It's new, it's different, it's not the defense we've been used to, but it's going to be a good defense. And then they were not that great, and we were like, well, what happened? It's kind of it was a lot like the Oregon game. Both the offense and defense kind of got off to a slow start. By the second half, they were rolling. And I think that was kind of the same way. They got in, they made a whole bunch of adjustments. And Kevin Steele did his best. He figured out what they needed to do. He got some players in the game. Big Cat Bryant played in a good amount of the second half. And Auburn's defense really turned it around. So did the offense. And a big ranked win against Kentucky. And then for the Bulldogs. So Georgia, they had a little bit of everything go on. It was 10-5, Arkansas leading in the middle of the third quarter last year, or in the middle of the third quarter this past week in Fayetteville. We were all watching the TV like, what in the world's going on? Georgia ended up, of course, winning. Lord, that we would have talked about that forever if Georgia had lost. So Georgia ended up winning. And then really, I think the biggest question mark today is their entire quarterback situation. They have 3 quarterbacks that could legitimately play. Stinson is the guy who kind of came in the second half, really took over the game and beat Arkansas. But there's a difference between taking over the game and beating Arkansas and taking over the game and beating Auburn. So we'll have to see how that goes down. JT Daniels was cleared. JT Daniels was cleared from his injury. He ended up. He should be able to play today. I just don't know I don't know how big of an injury it was. Has he been practicing? We don't really know. So nobody really has a clue who Georgia's going to start. Also, Georgia has kind of been hinting around that they might be wearing their black jerseys tonight. So we'll see if there's another blackout in Athens. Of course, everybody remembers that game, I believe, from 2007, which wasn't that great of a game for the Tigers. And then Auburn actually, Christian Tank Bigsby. Let's talk about the running backs for a second for the Tigers. Sean Shivers, he got the most carries. He clearly had the most of everything. He played okay, but what really concerned me was Auburn's running game. Bo Nix, with I believe around 30 yards, led the entire team in rushing. So Auburn's going to have to be able to run the ball if they want to beat Georgia and Athens. I mean, I know a lot of teams now like to, instead of, running to set up the pass, they pass to set up the run. But I just think that's not really who Auburn is. Maybe it will be under Chad Morris, but Auburn, regardless, you have to be able. Your running back needs to lead the team in rushing. Like Bo Nix is not like the game plan wasn't like we need Bo Nix to lead us in rushing. If it was Nick Marshall, that might be different, or Cam Newton. So they pretty much played Sean Shivers versus DJ Williams. Tank Bigsby got a couple of carries. Tank Bigsby, I believe, had the big kickoff return to start off the game. So I think they'll play Tank a little bit more. I don't see them playing Harold Joyner or Mark Anthony Richards just as much. I just think when you just get into the numbers and the rotation of everything and how much Auburn realistically wants to run the ball, I just don't think the bottom 2 and the 5 team running backs will get that. And then I would say let's talk about the offense and the defenses for Auburn and Georgia. Okay, so the Auburn offense against the Georgia defense. That is probably, Georgia's defense is the strength of that Georgia team. Kirby Smart has a great defense, a veteran defensive line. That is going to be a tough task for the Auburn Tigers to go up against. And then on the other side of the ball, Auburn's defense, who a lot of people were like, oh, what happened? But they really found themselves in the second half, kind of like the Oregon game, like we said. I think, between Georgia's offense, Georgia has a brand new offensive, both teams have a brand new offensive line other than like last week. So I think there's going to be a lot of running up the quarterback, a lot of blitzes tonight from both defensive lines trying to get pressure on the quarterbacks. So that'll be very interesting to see as well. But I really think, Auburn's defense versus Georgia's offense, that's going to be a really big matchup to watch, especially all the battles in the trenches. This might not be the most high-scoring game ever. So let's go ahead. We'll make our pick for the Auburn-Georgia game in just a little bit. Of course, the game will be in Athens. This is the first time, I think I said it in something else, since like the 30s that there's going to be like this big of an attendance in Athens. It's going to be weird. I thought Auburn, if you looked around the entire, college football world, whatever you want to call it, like teams like LSU, I mean, I'm sure their COVID protocols are great, but when you're watching the game, I mean, it felt like an empty stadium. There weren't a lot of people there. It was kind of weird. Whereas Georgia, they, in Auburn, I just see Georgia Stadium right now. In Auburn, they have placed, the chair backs on the individual seats, and it's kind of like you have the zone, and you just have to sit in a chair back, and it's ended up making it to where it fills the entire stadium. People aren't kind of crowding in to where they want to sit on the 50-yard line, so it makes the stadium look full. I mean, when you zoom in, it's 20% capacity, but at least, from the broad, like, Skycam or something, like, you can tell, like, there's people there. It looks like a football game. They're not playing in some kind of empty building, and I thought Auburn students did great providing some noise at home against Kentucky. We'll have to see how Georgia does in their home opener and how all that looks. So it should be a big one in Athens. Of course, like we've been saying, ESPN Saturday night, 6:30 Central Time, 7:30 Eastern Time from Sanford Stadium in Athens. So that'll be pretty much it from our Auburn, Georgia preview. It's going to be a big game, and you are not going to want to miss the 125th edition of the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Then we're going to go ahead and talk about the Patrick Party for a little bit. So we'll debut in just a couple of moments. We'll debut our Patrick Party from Central Phoenix City Stadium, Garrett Harrison Stadium, where we filmed right after the matchup between the Auburn High School Tigers and the Central Red Devils, coached by Patrick Nix, former Auburn quarterback and father of Bo Nix. So that'll be fun. So the Patrick Party will post that video a little bit after. Well, I'm seeing the locker room now. Georgia has their red jerseys, so not a blackout in Athens tonight unless they just want to pull a stunt. Anyways, we're going to post our 1-minute video on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the things. Coming up right after this show ends, we'll have our polls for you so you can vote for who you think is going to win all of the big SEC games. And then, of course, tomorrow we'll have NFL Primetime with Patrick. I'll pick all the games, I believe, in Week 4 the NFL season. We had Thursday Night Football, of course. That wasn't really that great between the Broncos and the Jets last week, so we'll talk about that. We'll have our polls again. It's fun to see. I get to go through and see who voted for who, so yes, I know if you made a bad pick. And then we'll have our newsletters, of course, every Friday. You can subscribe and find anything else about the Patrick Party on patrickparty.com. Well, it's looking like that is going to wrap it up for us for the most part here on the Patrick Party pregame show. In just a couple seconds, we will show you our picks as we round out our show from Phoenix City, right near Columbus, where the Tigers and the Dogs played from 1916 to 1958. So that's going to do it from us here at the Patrick Party pregame show. Enjoy your college football weekend. It is a big game tonight and a big day for the Tigers and the Dogs. So we're going to go ahead and roll our video. Enjoy your college football weekend, and we'll see you next Saturday, folks. Welcome into the Patrick Party. Week 2 of Auburn football, and a big one. Auburn plays Georgia. We'll get to that in a second. We're here from Garrett Harrison Stadium, where the Central Red Devils and Auburn High Tigers play. Central's head coach is Patrick Nix, former Auburn quarterback, and his son, Bo Nix, is playing this Saturday. And Auburn and Georgia used to play in Columbus. A lot of parallels, kind of crazy. But let's get into our picks. So first, you have Florida, South Carolina in that first time slot. It's a big one. I like Florida in this one at home in the Swamp. South Carolina's offense didn't look that great last week. Then you have Ole Miss, Kentucky, both lost. Ole Miss to Florida, Kentucky to Auburn. I like Kentucky in this one. Two very different teams. Kentucky runs the football. Ole Miss throws it all over the field, so that's going to be a fun one, but I like Kentucky. Alabama, Texas A&M play on the SEC on CBS Game of the Week. I like the Tide big in this one at their home opener in Bryant-Denny Stadium. A&M did not look good last week against Vanderbilt, and if you don't look good against Vanderbilt, you probably aren't going to look good against Alabama. And then you have Texas playing TCU, a big one in the Big 12. Texas barely survived their win last week against Texas Tech on the road. I like them against TCU. And then the Deep South's oldest rivalry for the 125th time, for the first time in 80 plus years. It is this early in the season, for the first time since the 30s, that there's this many people in attendance at Athens. It's going to be a very different ball game. I like the Tigers in this one, of course. I really think that Georgia's offense, with all of their quarterbacks, they're not going to be able to put it together until later in the season. I like Bo Nix and the Chad Morris offense, and I think Auburn's defense is going to have something to prove after their not great showing in the first half of last week. So I like the Tigers. That's all of us from here at Garrett Harrison Stadium here in Columbus, Georgia. Enjoy your college football weekend.